Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Detention. We are so excited to be joined here tonight by the one, the only, Brennan Lindner, president and co-founder of Generic Events and race director of the Herbalife24 Los Angeles Triathlon.
Equally comfortable in sports, advertising, and marketing industries, Brennan creates unique events that express his passion for athletics, advertising, and entertainment. His creativity and originality have led to an award-winning portfolio of events that span the globe and have entertained and challenged thousands of athletes. Brennan Lindner, welcome to Detention.
I'm scared and excited at the same time, and you make me sound so good. So thank you. If you could call me every day and recite that, it'll make me feel better.
Scared and excited.
No, glad to be here.
Scared and excited is actually what we're going for in this show. So thank you. We feel like we're nailing it.
Yeah, we can set that up as like the ringtone of your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Every time somebody calls, you'll get to hear that.
It's like that Jack Handy, it's like deep thoughts, when they call, it'll be like, you're okay, thank you. It's all good. Well, but thanks for having me.
We're stoked you're here. And one of the questions that we always launch into is this your first time in detention?
I probably not. Most likely not. I gotta say, I'm continually told by my parents that, I was somewhat challenging as a child and did not always do as I was told. So, yeah, I've been in detention and restriction and grounded and other things.
We are so happy to hear that. We very often, we have a lot of, a lot of athletes on this show. And I don't know if you know triathletes, but they tend to be kind of goody two-shoes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are like, I've never done anything wrong in my life. So what's the big one? What's the biggest trip to detention that you can remember that you feel okay talking about?
Oh my goodness. I really don't know, but I know a lot of times I spoke with the principals and, about things that were going on. And here's a funny one, but it'll super age me. And I don't think I was necessarily the one doing that, but there was a group of kids at the school I was at that I think took their parents' credit cards and were doing those dial phone, with the women talking on the phone. I don't even know what that was called back then. But somehow all these kids ran up thousands of dollars and said they were trying to figure out how these kids got the credit cards to do it. And I just remember talking to the principal and I was like, I have no idea. So, but
did you know though? Were you like the secret kingpin of that?
No, I've always been an instigator. Mm-hmm. So, because I'll always make it, really easy. I'm like, yeah, go do this. It'll be fun and then see what happens. So I don't think I ever discouraged many things, but I do remember, here's a good one actually. So, but my parents went out of the country when I was a kid and the babysitter was there and I said, hey, we're going to ride our bike off the diving board into the pool. And she said, oh, your parents, is that okay? And I was like, oh yeah, they let us do it all the time. So all the weekend we were riding our bikes off, into the pool and all this. And then when my parents came back, and the babysitter lady was leaving, and they're like, oh, she's like, I do have to ask, is it okay if they were riding their bikes into the pool? And my mom's like, what? So there were things like that all the time that I did.
Love it.
That's wonderful.
Very, very happy to hear that. That must have been a real fun afternoon as your mom was like, say what?
This bicycle is ruined.
We could go on. That's the other show. We'll call it
Got it.
The sequel.
Awesome. So the other thing that we really want to know from folks is that this has been obviously a year of a lot of changes for people. And one thing that has happened, though, is that people have had some time and space freed up to pursue things that they otherwise might not have been able to. For us, that's been the endurance school. Have this freed up any space for you to do anything new? How have you been spending your time during the pandemic?
It's, I think it's wild because I think for everybody it's been so different. And like some people's lives really haven't changed much, whereas other people, it's been drastic, whether it's, as bad as I'd say, job losses and all that. We've been somewhere in the middle, we were fortunate enough really with, I'd say some government support because the event industry, I would say people ask, they're like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, well, what I did was, bring, thousands of people together, which with COVID is not possible. So, really the past year has been somewhat weird, which I will talk about more, is, because dates kept getting moved and we weren't sure what was going to happen. But for me personally, it was actually a great way to sort of get back into riding and training and, my love of the sport. Because as I think many of us know, race directors, as we get older, we get larger, we get grumpier, and we're not always doing the reason, that we started this sport. And, and I started riding a lot. It's like, I always look back, I started triathlon in '96, ages ago. And then, once I had, my daughter, I stopped racing for about 10 years. And during that time, producing races, I hurt my back. I have scoliosis. So for about 10 years, I didn't do a lot of stuff. But so in this pandemic, I've been riding and ocean swimming like nonstop almost every day. And it's, my back doesn't hurt anymore. I'm a hell of a lot happier person. And so I've really gotten in touch with kind of that spirit and that reason why we do what we do, and I say me as a race director, but also as why I love, sport and adventure and what I'd say exercise gives people. I'm like the living testament to it now. Long story short, lot of gravel riding, a lot of freezing ocean swimming, hence my always wearing a scarf to keep me warm.
You'll never warm up.
I don't, but I'll live longer is what the studies say. If I do my ocean swimming, whatever that means.
Has that activity reinvigorated your enthusiasm around directing races?
It definitely has, and really, I think it's brought back, some of the fun and adventure to it, that's, to sort of bring people into that. Because, within triathlon, which is, my favorite, it can be very regimented and exact, and sort of the wonder and unpredictability of just going for a ride or ocean swimming, just kind of say, hey, this is just fun, and I've always been a proponent of triathlon can be fun. Just a crazy little race. You don't have to do your best, do a sprint. It doesn't have to be 70.3. It doesn't have to be, Ironman, to do it. So bringing back the fun.
And the events that you've produced have been known for being not your run-of-the-mill races, and yet your company is called Generic Events. Can you tell us a bit about how you arrived at that name?
Yeah, I mean, my background, I was an architect, but then I did advertising. And so I really just like being fun and creative. And at the time when we started putting on events, we didn't have a name. And I was a fan of Repo Man. And so where everything was generic in it, with the generic beer and the generic cereal. And I just love that. And at the same time, there were a lot of companies that were very aspirational and look at me, kind of thing. And I don't want to necessarily say the names, but it was always just like, hey, we're the best. We're the best. And I was like, well, it's not about me. It's about the events that we make. And it's like, it's much better for someone to say, hey, I love this, turkey trot, or this Day of the Dead, or this triathlon in Pasadena, because it is just amazing. And then they're like, oh, wait, it's all the same company that puts this on. This is amazing. So it's more about the product than the company. So,
so we didn't know
but a lot of people don't realize it.
We didn't know this about you, and you just let slip that you used to be an architect. Could you talk a little bit about how you made that leap from being an architect to being a endurance event race director?
Yeah, and I would say I was not a licensed architect, so I guess legally I can't say I'm an architect, but I was an architectural designer, for quite some time. No, I went to school in Boulder, and so I went through the environmental design program up there. And then, I built homes, and we designed here in LA and Santa Barbara a lot of, modern funky stuff. And it was a super blast doing it, but it was a heck of a lot of work and not a lot of pay, at the time. We weren't star architects. And, I wanted to change. And so, I had moved to Santa Barbara and was doing architecture. And then I said, I want to move back to LA, came back and actually worked in the animation business for some time, actually doing on that, and online games and cartoons, which is another passion of mine. And then went into advertising at Deutsch, and did more games and commercials and websites and car launches. But at the same time, I was always, racing, and then started putting on events, and it exploded. Yeah. There's more I can, talk about that for on and on if you want.
I need to know if you were one of the tens of people in the endurance world who already knew what Twitch was when we started.
I have kids. Come on. They're all about Twitch, watching this, they're talking about, I don't know who they are, but yeah, there's a lot of it's Twitch or Discord these days, that they're all about it. So, my son helped me set up a Discord server and all this, and was very excited to do so.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
We have a Discord channel.
We do.
We will, if you want to subscribe to the Endurance School, then you can come to our Discord server.
I do. I get the emails. I'm always
yes.
like, oh, there's this going on, and I'm like, yeah, no. So, even though I do different stuff, I'm still regimented. I'm like, I like the consistency of things, that get us out of bed in the morning, for sure.
So you've done a whole bunch of other things before you became a race director. What are some of the things that you've brought in from those other backgrounds of architecture, design, advertising, marketing, animation? Like, what are some of the skills that you have found useful in being a race director from your previous endeavors?
Well, I've always said, within the design world, even within, I'd say, architecture and building, is that it gives you such a holistic view of how things happen, which I think is imperative, from a race director, to look at how all the different pieces are working to actually make it, a solid structure, is the basic thing to look at it. And then within that too, I've always been a fan of urban planning and traffic flows, so if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be a cartographer or make maps or something like that, because I love to see how things develop. And, I'm also love, how do you make things work as well too, from a traffic perspective, because races don't work if you're blocking an entire city or a community and things like that. And then you have to be solution oriented to show how it's going to work. So that background was fantastic. I learned lots of graphics and design, and I'd say all sorts of computer programs as well too. So I was always, in charge of, all right, we're going to build our website. It's going to look great. It's not going to be a crappy t-shirt. Everything actually has to be really cool on that. So I've always had a hand in the design of how things go. And but all those things just kind of marry, and it works within event directing, because someone said it's great for people with ADD, which evidently I must have, because it's like, all right, I'm going to deal with marketing. Wait, I've got operations over here. Oh, I've got sponsors I got to talk to. And so there's a little bit of everything to keep it interesting.
That's awesome. I have some questions about the traffic part, especially because I'm really interested in, I know that race directing has got to be challenging no matter where you do it, but you put on a race in Los Angeles, which is one of the biggest cities in the world. How does that facilitate or complicate the process of creating a race and making it spectacular?
It's a challenge. It took us, I think, over 2 years, to really go through the process for this, and as always, there was a previous iteration of this event, that, it ended after a while and left some bad taste in, government, I'd say the taste in their mouths. So a lot of what to start to bring this back was government relations, and showing the plan that we had was actually going to work and minimize disruption in their neighborhoods. So a lot of it was thinking through, is like, how is this course going to go through? What's the time impact, from the road closures to the road openings? How we're going to notify people, and ultimately reduce any phone calls and complaints, to any council people and, government officials. So it was really, a heck of a lot of planning and timelines. And fortunately, I had raced the previous race, and I live right in one of, I'd say, the most congested areas, of LA, which is Venice Beach, which is the only access to the water in the city of LA. So I kind of know what the concerns would be and how I could make them work. So, looking at it, it was like we had to meet with, I think, 12 different city council people, walk them through the plan, 2 different, county districts. We had to work with LAPD, which had, I think, 400 officers, to make it easy for them. You've got Caltrans, we have road freeway closures, you've got downtown LA. And it goes on and on, but it was a lot of meetings and really informing people, how it was going to work. We even met with, I think, 20 odd neighborhood councils, which are different little neighborhood pockets, so they could let all of their residents know what was going to be happening on that morning. And evidently, we did a really good job, which I'm happy that, my team and I were able to do, because, it went really amazing for the first year event. And, I'm really sad we didn't get to replicate it last year, and can't wait to do it this year.
Same. I'm also excited for it. I'm going to sign up for it. Very excited.
But, yeah. And, what I was saying is, like, the only other chance, we have 22 miles of uninterrupted streets, in Los Angeles. I always say this is a city of 4 million people, 7 million in the county, and if you're not out of a certain area by 9 or 10 in the morning, you're going to be trapped. So it's like, to ride it on a bike, you can get downtown, and I think, it could be 28, 29 minutes. on a bike hammering, which, you can almost never do in a car. And it's an absolute thrill to be, where the streets are closed, LAPD has it secure, and you're just, zipping down. I mean, it's true. It's
Sounds great.
So some big race news today. Ironman Texas is postponed, and that is it's a bummer for the athletes that are like, in the last few weeks of their training. Similarly, a few weeks ago, Ironman New Zealand gets canceled with like about a week to go. Not asking you to speculate what's going on inside the Ironman decision room, but you've had to postpone your event, and I was wondering if you would talk to us a little bit about what is going on, for you guys as you were coming up to making that decision. If you kind of walk us through the nuances of deciding how to either cancel or postpone a race.
Yeah, and we briefly spoke about this, but it is really, one of the most difficult decisions, you can do. Last year, and for us looking at it in LA, we are been under lockdown now since, I would say, March 13th. The last event I produced was March 7th, 2020. It was the Pasadena Triathlon, and it's been, nothing since then. And so we postponed or canceled, I think it was about 8 events, last year. And so, but looking for this year is like, working with municipalities, you're like, all right, is this feasible? Does this look feasible? Where they'll be saying, it does based on these parameters. But with anything, and specifically now, is like, we have to be flexible. And so if suddenly something flares up, you're going to have to, I hate to use the word pivot, but, things are going to have to pivot, you're going to have to change, and you're going to have to adjust. And from a race director perspective, and I'll speak for Ironman on this, is none of us want to postpone a race. I mean, you have a crew and people working for one purpose, to produce an amazing event experience. And you've gone over every scenario you can, except if like COVID, if there's a flare up, which is going to cause a lockdown. And so you're going to try to push that as close as you feasibly can, till when you can cut it off. Because I know Ironman, it's gotten flack for waiting so long, but it's like, you want this to happen. And the financials, is a whole other thing, what it costs then to postpone or move everybody, and really just the inconvenience to everybody on it. So, but to kind of sum that up is, within all of our events, we have, really our predictable drop dead date. If we're not getting, I'd say, the positive inclinations based, on CDC permitting, sponsorship, even kind of worries on that, from if they're putting people in a comfortable location, but it's very difficult. And and I'll even go back to the Ironman. A lot of people are asking, why didn't they change the bike course, and things like that. But it's actually tough just to do that, in a sense that if you try to make it a tighter bike course, you're maybe violating CDC guidelines by having people loop or go back and forth, where you're increasing really the proximity and duration of people together. So it's like, I'm sure they thought about every scenario, and then it's like, hey, we can't. I mean, it's hard. Long answer, I guess.
No, that's great.
I mean, we sort of assumed it would be a long answer, because I think it's a more complicated subject than, because when your race is canceled as an athlete, there's a big like emotional response, and everything seems cut and dry and straightforward. The clarity of anger, and I think it's actually like I think it's actually a little bit more complicated than that.
It is, and I think, and this is across the board, that, when we do have changes to a race and stuff, I think people forget that we're all just humans trying to do the best that we can, and at times, and I say Ironman, but it's a company, and it's like, yes, it's a company, but you actually have people, with such as myself, that are passionate about what they're trying to do. And it's crushing, to receive all this scathing when it's like people have given really their heart and soul to make something happen. And not that, I think we all can understand where someone else is, but, a little humanity and just gratitude, goes a long way and stuff. And, and it does help, I think, because you're saying is people have this emotional buildup to the event. And when it gets moved, I think it'd be behoove, and you kind of brought this to me, is like, what is then the option to help replace, what is that missing? Because you're never going to fully, I'd say, hey, this virtual race is going to, provide it. But what is that kind of next little teddy bear you can give somebody, for a little bit of comfort to tide them over? Because it's been a long year for all of us. I mean, it's I'm ready for this to be over.
I bet. I think between the, disappointed athletes and having to redo courses and all of that, we've mentioned a lot of reasons why athletes can and should have some empathy for race directors. But can you tell us a little bit about what is awesome about that job? Like why do you enjoy it? Why is this the position that you've landed in, and what do you get out of it?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, initially, when we started this, I loved really what sport provided for people, in a sense that it was just fun to actually challenge your body. And I always say triathlon is like when the first time you do it, trying to go from a swim to a bike to a run, you're kind of flopping around. But to see how you actually adjust to that, and then also really the endorphins, what it actually does for people in their lives, it's like people need to get out of the office. They need to get outside, have a little balance. You don't have to be training all the time, but it's great to have this work-life balance. And I think sport provides that. So when we started, it was all about, hey, get outside, come race, whether you're a beginner or if you're an experienced athlete, it's for everybody. And it was always exciting, during the rise of triathlon, people were just like, hey, this has changed my life. You meet a lot of people out of relationships, in recovery in some fashion, or they're losing weight. And what it's provided them for self-esteem, in a small little sprint triathlon, it's launched them into other things. And, it's really just kind of catapulted into other areas, whether it's a large 5K run that we put on. We do this huge Day of the Dead 5K. And it's in memory of, Dia de los Muertos, but it's in memory of people they lost. But people dress up, they have pictures, and it's a celebration. And you just really get into everyone's world of like, hey, we're together, we're in this, and here's how we're expressing ourselves. So it's awesome. And then another thing that, keeps me going, and I'll bring this up, but we work with Skid Row Running Club, which is based out in downtown LA, but it's a judge who's been training all these previously homeless people to do marathons. And so they've traveled to Israel and Ghana and all these places, but they now have an endurance team, and they're going to be training for our race. But so these two guys, one, is a convicted felon. He may have killed someone. I don't know, but he's out there swimming. I had to give him a wetsuit because he was out swimming 2 weeks ago. And another guy had been homeless for a long time, but they're excited about what they're doing and like doing, providing a race or an experience for them to continue on this positive, I'd say, direction in life. I'm all for it. My wife calls me a do-gooder every now and then, so I'm done.
I can see it. I love that. That's great.
But I can't be mean.
I believe you.
That's good. Yeah, you gotta put that out there too. Like, it's possible. It can be mean. You need to play that part.
It is possible. But to sum it up, is like really a sport can do good in the world. And I'm privileged that I can actually help do that. And then I haven't even thrown in the nonprofits, but it's a perfect avenue to really help peer-to-peer fundraising, across the board. I mean, you get to kill, and I don't even need to say kill anymore, in other words, but you get to kill two birds with one stone, doing this.
What qualities make a successful race director?
Interesting question, because I think I've seen so many different qualities, some of which I have and some that I don't. But I think, the ability to look at the whole picture of what's occurring, getting the right people in the right jobs, is another thing. Because really management, because again, you're only as good as your team. It's like I'm one person, but I have to bring in, whether it's 60 or 200 people, and then 600 volunteers to close down a city, and then make sure everyone gets in and out safely. So definitely managing people. I think problem solving is another huge one, because you really actually have to help, I'd say, city officials look how you're going to make this happen in a positive way. Because city people they get asked everything and they want to say no. But if you provide them, hey, this can work, then they'll actually be like, hey, that's good. And then it does seem like a lot of race directors are not nasty, but some are mean, but they do great. I'm like, but I'm not one of those. So, who knows? Maybe I could be amazing if I was a little more business savvy or harsher, I say. But
can you tell us about what has surprised you about the job? Like, what's something that you never would have expected to be a part of it when you signed up for producing your first event?
It is so funny you asked that, but I was talking to some other race directors here about this, but we all started putting on races because we love sport, but through the events of the past 15 years, that's changed somewhat, where we now have to prepare for vehicle incursions, so now we're becoming these terrorism experts, and it's also about, all right, how do you prevent someone with a backpack, and it's just things have changed over time where I never thought I would be an expert now in COVID social distancing plans, so I'm surprised at, it's not just sport, it's a large scale event experience that has a sporting component to it. So it really is, I'd say, changed into that. And it's not bad, it's just one of those things. You're like, oh, okay. Well.
It sounds like you kind of like what you're actually running is like a PR and communications firm that like also has to like put on an event.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, you do see a lot of these marketing agencies that come in and they do a one-off and then it's done. And, I don't know from a race experience if it's good, but yeah, I mean, we are PR and marketing and production and all of it in there to do a complete package.
Okay, so we put on camps and we put on small camps. We put on camps that have 20 to, I think our biggest camp was like 90 people. So you're putting on events that are many orders of magnitude bigger than that. And even for our camps, we have like a to-do list that starts a year beforehand, and then it's a process of sort of moving through the year and ticking things off. We were wondering if you could walk us through perhaps a abbreviated version of, you wrap the race on, I don't know if it's a Saturday or Sunday race, maybe get a day off. Take us through wrapping the race up through when you put the race back on a year later. Like, what are the things that have to occur?
Well, typically, I mean, one of the most important things to do is right when that race is over, before you have a beer or, you do kind of fall asleep for like 3 days, is you try to download everything that went wrong. Because you got to get it out of your head. Because all I do, which I hate to say, as a race director, is you're looking for problems. How do I solve them? How do I solve them? And so when you do see them, and not that it's necessarily a problem later, but you're like, oh, we could do this better, is you want to have a huge postmortem or debrief, of yourself, get it out of your head, and then solicit that from all of your staff, coworkers, anyone on there, so that you can create this postmortem to reflect out in a couple of weeks of like, all right, here's what we want to change going forward. So I think that's the most valuable thing ever, because if you don't do it, you'll forget it, and you could potentially do the same thing again. And, after you do that is, really it's, fortunately with year over year doing races, you're like, all right, I've got my calendar out. Now it's like, all right, we're going to look at what is our marketing plan going to be? Are we going to have graphics changes? What's the website going to look like? What's our messaging going to be for the next 12 months, the marketing plan, And now even with social is a whole other, branch over there. Mm-hmm. But what I noticed is that everything has gotten so much more complex. You guys probably know, like all the different channels you have to hit on now. It's all these sub calendars of things to do. But, to bring it back is like, I mean, I always have, I'd say, this action list of just random things that we're working on. You have to then correspond it over with your production calendar, and then correspond it over to your marketing calendar and your advertising calendar. And it's like, it's always cross-referencing and massaging. And then when you have 4 or 5 different events, they're all in various stages, of juggling, as I say.
Didn't even think of that. But of course, there's like events that are like rolling over each other as you go throughout the year.
It's not just put one on and then sleep.
It's always, yeah. And it's been interesting just do this whole year off, because I'm so used to that intensity cycle of, race and no race, but, now it's been this sort of area, and I've been talking to some other race directors. We're going to put on some mini races just to get ourselves back up to that intensity and, it's almost shoot from the hip. You need to get to it.
Is there like a race director's bar? Like it sounds like you guys have like a little club down there.
Or a guild, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. A race director's guild.
There should be, and it's interesting because a lot. I mean, there's some people I really just talk and network with, and I think it's sort of changed over time because I think a lot of people used to consider other race directors as adversaries. Which is not always the case because, really is if we're all doing a great job as more people are coming into our sports, and it's only going to keep, everybody, I'd say, employed with that. So I've always been, free to share knowledge with people, and a lot of people the same, with me as well.
That is also...
But I think we should have a bar. We always share war stories, It's like, oh, this went wrong and this person complained and you're like, oh my God.
So a lot of the race directors that we've spoken to have shared that that the actual experience of race day, whether it's athletes in the water or bike course out on trafficy streets, that a lot of that experience is anxiety. Is that true for you? And if so, how do you manage that on race day?
It is true because I mean you worry about it all, but I always find is once the race starts, there is a level of anxiety that, I mean, you did hit a different level worrying about something else, but it really builds up because you want an on-time start because that impacts, in my mind, how the rest of the day goes. So it's, when the call times, at 3 or 4 in the morning, or even if it's midnight, you're building up to the 6 or 7 a.m., start. And when that first, whether whistle, gun, cannon goes off, then I'm like, okay, now I can take a break, because really it's like to have key people then, all right, I know so-and-so is in charge of the bike course, on this, I can check in with them. So-and-so is checking with the run course, and you can manage those things. But at least I know I've got my 1,000 or 25,000 people in the process of completion.
That's amazing.
But yeah, it's always anxious. And it's like after every, I remember the very first Xterra trail run half marathon we put on is like, it was the biggest race we'd ever done. And I got married, I think 2 weeks later or something stupid like that. And but my wife and I came home and our other business partner, and we're like, all right, we'll go out later. And we all just fell asleep on the couch for like 16 hours. But that's typically, how, I mean, it's so intense, and then you will sleep. You'll have a huge sleep afterwards.
I bet.
Tell us a little bit about your daily existence. You're a busy guy. I know things have been different in the past year, but do you have any routines in your life that you revisit every day? Or most days, if we're being, generous.
Beard maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah. Care maintenance. Yeah, no, it's huge. And really for this past, year with the pandemic, it's cycling twice a week, ocean swimming. I think swimming hands down is the one thing that keeps me centered. And that's why I've been just a fan of this ocean swimming right now. And then self-care, actually Pilates. So, as I said, I have back issues and something like that, because I realize, when you're not in chronic pain, how much happier, you really are. And I feel for people that have had whatever, and, I know there's a painkiller route and all that, but it's like, I understand, for that, meditation, huge fan of it. I don't do it as frequently as I want, but amazing on it. And then always, I carry around, I would say, a little book to write things down in. Those are my, when I go to City of LA for meetings, the police have to check you in. So
it is always nice to have law enforcement stickers on like, a piece of your business work. One of my old laptops was stolen once, and I kept the evidence sticker on it for like 2 years because it was awesome. I was like, people are like, what is that? I'm like, oh, that's a French evidence sticker. What?
That's what I figured.
What do you tell us about the meditation? What do you find that you get out of it?
I find it's actually, well, the one I always do Headspace. That's I've been doing that for a couple of years now, which is just great. And I mean, one thing I really like out of it is that, he always says is you've given yourself this time, to yourself, like a gift to yourself. Because I think all of us, whether you're a race director or not, is like, take care of the kids, or I got to work, I got to do this, I got to do that. And to slow it down, you almost need that, that sound that happens when time slows down to actually sit there and tune out, but it's also tune in, to actually come back and then be recharged. So I love the mindfulness aspect of it and really just slowing things down. And when it's only 15 minutes, you're like, why didn't I do this more often? It's like you can find the 15 minutes. And then I always share too, but who's the guy that was, the newscaster that had the panic attack?
Oh, I heard this story. Something Harris.
Yeah. And then, but he wrote a book and it was called 10% Better, and he just said he found meditation made his life 10% better and it was entirely worth it. And it's like, why not have that just a little better?
That is a book that I have had on my reading list and not yet gotten to, and it just made its way to the top again. So you talk like someone who has some firsthand experience about like what the benefits of sport are. What has been your relationship with sport throughout your life? Where did you get started? How did you wind up in endurance events in 1996? What's your sport journey?
That is funny. Well, funny in a sense, because, I grew up playing soccer. So kid in the 70s and 80s, played soccer for like probably 10 years or something like that. But it was somewhere in middle school when I realized, like, I'm not that good at this, and same thing with I think baseball at that. And I think right around the same time I started swimming. And so all through high school, I was a swimmer, but I was never like, the top. I was always a couple points, adding to the team and stuff like that. And that was really my sports, really through high school. Then college, I did club swimming at Boulder, which then transcended really just to, a lot of, we'll say, social activities for 5 years there at Boulder. And then out of college, a buddy of mine was in triathlon. I mean, he'd probably been in triathlon since like the 80s, like full old school, I'd say the Bud Light series and things like that. And his dad was doing it. And he had gone out of the country and left me a bike. And so I had been swimming and then biking. He's like, you need to do a triathlon. And that's what started like in 96 to, I did my first triathlon. It was the Senior Olympics down at ASU in Tempe. But, it's like they did have all the senior citizens doing all the sports, but the triathlon was open to everyone. And so, I did the triathlon, and I think it was January in Arizona, which is cold. And I'll never forget, you do the swim. And then I was on the bike, and then I was trying to get the run, but I couldn't get my helmet off because my hands were so cold, from the bike, so someone had to help me get that off. But, I just loved the whole experience of training for the race and running for the race. And I mean, I did, probably 14 years of just a lot of different, racing and, but pure enjoyment. I was always making jokes, on the bike and the run with people, whereas triathletes are, looking at their watch, going along, and I'm like, hey, have you been training, and just, and they're like, shut up, guy. And I'm like, so, but it was always very fun. So that was my journey. Yeah.
We have a great question from chat about, this is from one of our athletes, Kirby. What should participants do on race day that they don't do on race day?
There's a million things. I would say get there early. That's, I think that's the one thing that is, you can never give yourself enough time, because you never want to be in a position to be rushed to like go through I would say your morning ritual to get yourself, whether you're participating or racing, it's nice to have time to relax, to do what you want to do, and go to the bathroom. So that's two. That's actually two, but which is part of your ritual though, if you think about it. So give yourself enough time.
I very much like that answer. I think it decreases a whole lot of the like race morning anxiety if people just show up and be there. Because like the extra 15 minutes of sleep isn't going to do anything.
Because you're not sleeping,
right? It really
right.
isn't. Yeah.
Right.
You can sleep tomorrow.
Exactly. Kirby would also like to know who your favorite pro to have at races is. Is that something that you're able to say?
It's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, do you know this person and that person? And it's like, I know a lot of the names, and it's funny you say favorites, and it's like, but I enjoy actually any pro that comes out just to watch them excel. It's, we used to do this high caliber 5K in Santa Monica, and I would drive the lead vehicle, and it was so cool to have the back of the car open, and it was quiet, but you would just hear the feet, going, just the patter. And there's something just beautiful about seeing, people excel at what they do. I mean, I love it. So, but, I always have to say Heather Jackson on there, only because she's like the funniest, sweetest woman. And I know we're in a loaded, I'd say place over here, but she is so fun and so modest, and I think it makes it so easy for all of us to connect with her, just because, she, not that she's an open book, but she's just like, I think gracious through it all.
Very real. Yeah.
Yeah. And her laugh. I mean, it's like, I'm always like, oh, can you just laugh some more? I'm like, it just makes me happy.
That's wonderful. What would you do if you weren't a race director? Like if you had to be an astronaut or something, what would you be?
That is a great question. There's too many things that I'd like to be. A lot of, what's, and probably what I would do right now, and I don't even know why I'm saying this, but it's like social activism. In a sense, we're in Venice, and there's a lot of things that I see with government not working, and not that I'm the one to fix it, but it's like, I think a lot of us, I say human beings, that we've somewhat given up, we don't see how the world can work for us. And not that our government has to take care of us, but I think some of us don't feel that we have a voice. And so, I think, I'd somehow be politically active in some fashion, to mobilize people. Or I'd go live in the mountains, one or the other. So.
Speaking of either of those two answers, work with people or go live in the mountains, being successful in the sport in triathlon, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a race director, whether you do anything, usually requires forging all sorts of partnerships and alliances. What advice do you have for making durable and valuable connections with other companies, with other sponsors, and with people?
I always say, you have to get rid of the thought of what can you do for me? Because a lot of people, and I'd say smaller race directors, even big ones, are like, all right, what's the price point? What are you going to do this? And I think all of us have to change our mind about it, because it is brand relationships that you can work with to actually, for everyone to achieve different goals. So within, the sponsor question, it's like, hey, what are you up to this year? It's like, heck, yeah, we'd like some money, but there's other ways that we can provide value to each other, whether it's brand association, is it marketing, is it underwriting, cost on things? Oh, are you looking for more sales? Is it online sales through emails, or is it, a retail location? And I find that it's really fun to brainstorm with people, what is a different way to get them excited about what we have? A lot of people at an event, what are they doing? Are they trying to sell, or is it social impact? Or is it they just want to, be at the event? They have like 100 people they want to bring out. So I think it's fun to create from a place of not zero expectations, but like, hey, let's talk about this. And sorry, my daughter is texting me to play Roadblocks. So I actually have to accept her permission here. This is the joy right here. And my son as well too. Thanks, guys.
I keep
this
muting.
Is what we should do on Twitch, is that we should now have you play Roadblocks with your kids and we'll stream it. That's why we're here on Twitch.
But did you see there was a 5K on Roblox? So
what?
JDRF, who's our nonprofit partner, they did some kind of activation within Roblox, which is brilliant. Because you can have these kids, they live in these worlds and do all this stuff, but they can, fundraise and sort of understand, I'd say somewhat civic responsibility and sort of the impact they can have on doing things.
That's so cool.
What is Roadblocks?
Yeah. It is basically, it's like you're in a Lego world. I'll say that. And so you have your little avatar. But so my daughter has a job in Roblox where she delivers pizzas. And so she gets Roblox to build her house. And so she'll come in and show me how, like, her house. And she's like, oh, I made this money. I got a new, bathtub. It's crazy. And so all her friends are on there. It's mind-boggling.
That sounds amazing. Is it, if I say it's like Animal Crossing, am I in the same universe?
I don't know, because I think you have to keep the pet alive, don't you, in Animal Crossing?
I'm not totally sure.
But basically it's Avatar, a world out there, and it's fun, and it's been huge, I think, for kids to connect. And before the pandemic, I was like, all right, 10 minutes of screen time, and now I'm like, all right, go for 2 hours, because it's really the only way that they're able to actually talk and interact with their friends. And this is somewhat, I would say, of a productive time to do it, as opposed to this other ask for TikTok that I just got here. So,
how did they do the 5K? Do you know?
I don't, and I'm glad. I'm going to make a note to actually look at that, because it was something. Because I think this whole gamification, that has been happening, is how do we sort of blend this world of live events, virtual? Because as we know, the world's changed, and there could be another pandemic, and we're going to have to shift, between all these different scenarios, to sort of have these different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So. Really I'll let you know, though. I'm gonna.
Yeah, please do. I'm really interested. So, with what you were saying, I'm also going to look up what Roadblocks is after this is over. With what you were saying about the need to like connect with people on what their mission is as you're forging partnerships within the industry. Are you able to say in like a one-liner what the mission of the Herbalife24 LA Triathlon is? Or is that a multi-sentence statement?
It's a multi-sentence, and to tell you the truth, it's, you know, there's different things, but I think you can sum up is to deliver a world-class event for the city of Los Angeles. So, you know, that's within that, but there's really different ways within that, is that we wanted to provide an opportunity for, you know, people within Los Angeles to enjoy their streets. You know, is one thing. You know, the second one is really within the culture of Herbalife, which loves endurance sports, is to actually, you know, provide an opportunity for all their staff, you know, to come out, you know, and they have this whole executive, you know, challenge going on. And then third on that is to have a social impact. You know, so we've teamed up with JDRF, you know, which is Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, you know, to help them fundraise. You know, so there's kind of three prongs, of which there's many others, you know, on that, but those are kind of the three avenues that we're going down.
Very cool.
And have fun.
Yeah, always.
So this kind of goes with the earlier question about like dealing with cancellations and postponements. Races have certainly gotten more expensive in the past few years. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where the different components of an athlete's entry fee goes.
That is a great question, you know, because I always say I started racing and it was, you know, $35 for a triathlon, and you got a bag with just tons of stuff and like a box of, you know, bars and things like that. You know, now you sometimes get this little Ziploc bag or something like that, you know, and you pay $250. It's really, I would say, location dependent. You know, we produce events here in Los Angeles, which is the most expensive, you know, aside from New York City, to produce an event. You know, and I say if I had been, you know, somewhat of a smarter race director, I would be somewhere in Texas, you know, where it's like the police just show up, you know, and you don't pay them. Or they, you know, they're just like, hey, we love it. It's a community event. So, but within Los Angeles, you know, I could speak specifically, but, you know, you've got your hard costs, you know, which are, you know, t-shirt, medal, and, you know, any other things, you know, food for the athletes and premiums, which take up, you know, a certain percentage of it. And then the permitting cost in LA is astronomical. And I'll say this, you know, up and down Southern California is, you know, even at the, you know, you think of a triathlon in LA, is each participant is spending about $15 of that just for the lifeguards, you know, just to start off, you know, and you throw in another $15 for, I would say then, you know, the premiums on that. So you're already at $30. Then you have to think of the staff and the man hours and all that. So it really just adds up. But I understand from participants, you don't really, it's impossible to understand everything that got into it, you know, and and not to, I'd say to generalize, but, you know, we're used to receiving products from overseas that are so cheap, you know, and it's like this race is not produced overseas. It's produced here with all these different, whether it's agencies, you know, staff and all that are getting paid, you know, a certain amount of, you know, dollars there. But it is expensive, you know, and it's like, I wish they could all be cheaper or free.
So you mentioned some overseas events, and I know you have produced races abroad. Can you tell us a little bit about those races and how, if the perception and participation in triathlon varies outside of the United States or outside of Los Angeles, like how do you see those variations from location to location?
That is a great question. And so, you know, I'm privileged, you know, that, God, I think it was 2006. No, my son was born in 6. So it was maybe 2004, 2005. A gentleman asked me, he said, hey, do you want to produce a race in Bali? You know, and I was putting flyers on cars, you know, and I just known him through the Tri Club, and I was like, hey, it sounds like a great idea. You know, I'm going to Thailand, you know, in a year or something. And so what ensued is that, you know, we worked with a local promoter there and this other, you know, partner of mine to actually produce the very first triathlon over in Bali in Indonesia. And through that, over the past, like 14 or 15 years now, is that we got to sort of revisit what triathlon, you know, was, and that youthful sort of energy, you know, from like, I'd say mid to late 90s to 2010. And it's still going strong over in Asia, whereas in the US, you know, it's had this, you know, it had a dip and then a plateau, and it was actually increasing as of last year. But it's been amazing to sort of see this, you know, culture of sport and endurance, you know, as I would say that middle class is elevating over in Asia. And it's like in 2006, the first event we had, I think we had maybe under 10 Indonesians, you know, actually do the race, because a lot of them didn't know how to swim. You know, people forgot helmets. You know, we had transition racks made out of bamboo, in all this. And then, but the last year we had it was 2 years ago due to the pandemic, but it's probably 90% Indonesians, of which you have these women that, I love it. It's a predominantly Muslim country, but, they do have the hijabs and fully clothed. And then they've got like a Shiv bike, coming out, and they crush it, so it's a full different world to actually, to have it happen. But I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I'm really tall there, which is even funnier because, I'm 6'1", but I feel like I'm this 7-foot tall giant, when I take all these photos with people. So it's really funny.
What's something that you would like to change in the triathlon world?
I'd like to change actually, and I think USAT might have brought this up a couple years ago, and I love what Ironman, does, but it's like Ironman in the 10 years actually took over the name triathlon. It's like you tell someone and you're like, hey, I'm doing a triathlon. I'm like, oh, Ironman. And I think that has sort of made it unattainable for a lot of people, as opposed to, I'd say, a lifestyle of whether it's endurance sports or multi-sport. Because, I grew up, Arizona, and it was all reverse triathlons, and pool swims, because, there's not as many lakes, in Arizona there. And so everything was, you'd be done within an hour, and you're like, oh, that was a blast, and you'd go out and do something else. And then living in Santa Barbara, there's a series called Night Moves, which is a swim run series every Wednesday night. And it's like you would just go out and you'd swim and then you'd run, and it was like at 5 or 6 o'clock, and the whole community would come down. And it really just had it's like, hey, we're doing this, and a lot of people were training for bigger things, but there was that, I'd say, fun. And while it was competitive, it was not just narrowed into that. So I think, to answer that is, for triathletes to really look at the short and Olympic distance as a way to, I'd say, lengthen your longevity and enthusiasm, for the event.
I love that.
Short course racing is cool.
And it's hard.
Not that I could ever do it because, you redline. There's no way. I mean, it was never my distance, but, I can respect it.
So we have another question from chat and a commitment to come and race in Bali. That is a very good idea. And they would like to know if being a race director for you, and I'm actually curious for most race directors, if that is 100% of what you do, or is it usually a side like passion project for folks who do that?
Of course, I think it really depends. I mean, I think a lot of people, it is a part-time thing, that, they, and actually my younger sister, lives in Arizona, but she's an attorney, but she also produces exterior trail runs, so that just because she loves the endurance world. And, and then for me I think it was 2006, I transitioned from advertising, over to full-time race directing. And, and I'm fortunate enough, a few years later, my wife, is my business partner, and handles all the marketing. So while we're a mom and pop, we actually produce some, large scale events, that, out there. And, but, I think, and I don't know what the percentage is, but, I think for the large scale events, whether it's Chicago or LA or, what we do is you actually have to be on this full time. Otherwise, you could go insane, so, but it is possible though, for somebody who actually is working full time and they're like, hey, I want to do something like this, and you can actually, put it on the side. I mean, that's how I started.
If you could get a message to every triathlete in North America, what would it say?
Oh, well, first I would say come to LA, in October, is because like racing is going to be back. That's because, I mean, I love how this race really showcases the city. And then, but, that's my plug, for Herbalife24 Try there. But I would also say to triathletes is like racing will return and get ready to have some fun again. So it's like, I feel like we're on the home stretch here, but it's like we just got to hang in there and be nice to your race director. That's 3 things.
Always. We have a new viewer who has a question about the Herbalife Triathlon. They would like to know if you can race 2 of the 3 legs on the triathlon course, and if you have any recommendations to find others to form a relay team.
That is great. Yeah, so we do have a great relay set up there. And that's one thing that, even I talked to Bob Babbitt all the time about this, is relays are a way to get people in the sport. Because there's a lot of people that they just don't want to swim. Or, in my case, And a lot of older, I'd say 45-year-old men is they don't want to run, things like that. So it's like relays are the best way to get into the sport. And it's like, I'm always say is people should just email the race director. Los Angeles fortunately has one huge, triathlon club and all these other smaller ones too. And there are always swimmers, that are looking, they don't want to do a triathlon. They're just like, I'll swim for you and you do the rest. So it's entirely possible. So yes, one person can do 2 legs and another person can do 1, or you can do it with 3 people.
Swimmers just like to feel special.
I know there's some people like, I don't do the rest. I'm always horizontal right there.
And where's the best place to stay in LA for the Herbalife Triathlon is our last question.
It's a great question.
That is a great question. Well, again, that depends. So LA is monstrous. And so for the triathlon, I would say go downtown, which actually had a resurgence, over the past 5 years with restaurants, parks, and really cool hotels. So there's some ones that have been like refurbished and rehabbed and all that. And then there's some new modern ones. Or else come out to Santa Monica, is also always a fantastic place. Because, you've got trails and parks and biking and all that stuff. And you're 2 miles from the start, so you could actually ride your bike to the start. So.
Love it. Well, I really look forward to it. I've heard fantastic things about the races that you put on, so I'm really excited to get to experience it. Everyone else out there, go sign up for the Herbalife LA Triathlon. It's going to be a ton of fun. October 24th, sorry. 24th. It was that weekend. It's going to be awesome.
That's the one thing actually about race directing is where dates are. You're like, oh, June 3rd. Oh, yeah, that's a Saturday.
You're like, I'm 100% sure. Right.
So weird.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming and spending the evening with us, Brennan. It's been great to talk to you. Thanks for answering all of our questions about race directing and about LA Triathlon and about how to go to detention more often. We hope you'll come back and give us an update on how the event's going. This has been a ton of fun to get to hang out with you.
I love it. Cool. Thank you guys for having me. Best wishes, and I can't wait to see you guys and really to see people how tall they are and how they fit into things, because we have no perspective right now. It's just someone in a box.
Exactly.
Molly is super tall and I am really short.
Chris is basically pocket sized. For all of those who've joined us in Twitchland, thank you so much for being here and thank you for your questions. We will be posting this on YouTube and sending it out via all of our social channels. Make sure you come back and join us on Thursday morning for our Zwift ride at 6:30 a.m. And until then, we hope you all have a happier and faster tomorrow. Bye, guys.